protecting the migrant family has been always at the center of our activities.
What we hear day to day from immigrants who come through the system is a totally dehumanizing process where no dignity is preserved. The allegations of abuse are limitless.
The last time that this country did something significant for immigrants was in 1986. We have very powerful adversaries who are fighting against that. Then the way they fight is not just rhetoric, it's actually practices. And at the center of those practices have been enforcement.
There was so much attention on the legalization fight and not as much focus on fighting the sort of harms of the systems, the way the system was locking up people, deporting people, tearing communities apart, separating families. For those of us like Detention Watch Network or other groups doing enforcement work, For Freedom's Fund really helped solidify, like, actually, this is a really important part of the work.
The issue of granting authority to local enforcement agencies to implement the immigration laws. What happens is that when local authorities get that power, the first place where they experiment is actually the day labor corner. And as we began fighting that shift, we began connecting with other groups across the country. And, the funding from For Freedom's Fund allowed us to actually reach out and learn from each other and build a base across the country.
Deportations were like spiking through the roof, and there had not been an existing funding strategy or even like a center of gravity of people who talk and think and strategize and fund groups who work on this particular issue. And For Freedom's Fund kind of stepped into that space.
They understood perfectly what grassroots community organizing means, being able to continue the work at the local level, having meetings with local law enforcement, with community members, to push back all the racial profiling and harassment that could happen every single day on the streets.
I think people just believed that, well, if somebody is undocumented, or if somebody commits a crime, or if somebody, then they should be detained and deported. And there's just an assumption that that's how the world should work. I don't think that's true anymore. I think that's a lot because of the work of the immigrant justice movement and the strategies the immigrant justice movement has employed with the help of For Freedom's Fund.
For Freedom's Fund can be directly credited for the changed dynamic where we are not going to accept limitless enforcement. It is no longer acceptable to stand up as a legislator or person in power and assert that we will, come down with a hammer on immigrants in exchange for something else. And that's a subtle but extremely important change that we've seen in the last 20 years.
It is because of the funding of For Freedom's Fund that we have actually been able to save over 500,000 families from deportation, because that's more or less the number of families that the TPS program protects. So we've been able to not just save the program, but also save those families. I think For Freedoms has convinced a generation of donors where they have come and they say, well, this is the right thing to do. This is the right field to invest. That it's not just about the families, but it's about the heart of the country.
This movement has managed to fight back, change language, secure victories at the state and local level, left and right. Really, there are many, many victories to celebrate. What would the next 20 years be like if we had really resourced this movement? What if this movement got the kind of resources it needs to win? It would be tremendous.